This is DW News live from Berlin. Hundreds of police officers in Washington are on high alert ahead of a rally by supporters of the January 6th insurrection to overturn Donald Trump's defeat. The protesters want dozens of January rioters behind bars freed and charges against hundreds of others dropped. Also coming up, it's the second day of voting in parliamentary elections in Russia, but with opposition candidates detained or barred from running, many feel the result is a foregone conclusion. And Paris pays tribute to the late Bulgarian artist Christo by realizing his dream of rapping the Arc de Triomphe. The United States has admitted it killed 10 civilians in a drone strike in Kabul on August 29th. The attack was one of its final military operations before pulling out of Afghanistan after 20 years. Initially, the Pentagon defended the strike, saying it hit an Islamic State militant. But now, after investigating the incident, it's owning up to the error.
The Pentagon trying to right a wrong. In a written statement, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin apologized for the strike, admitting that the deadly attack had been a tragic mistake.
The Secretary was briefed by General McKenzie this morning at 8 o'clock on the results of his investigation. And on behalf of the men and women of the Department of Defense, he offers his deepest condolences to surviving family members of those who were killed.
An internal review revealed that only civilians were killed in the strike on the 29th of August. Namely an aid worker and 9 members of his family, including 7 children. The attack happened as the US was scrambling to evacuate its forces and civilians from Afghanistan. And just days after a terrorist attack at Kabul airport, which killed nearly 200 people. Based on faulty intelligence, the US launched a drone strike on a car it believed was carrying militants about to mount a suicide bombing. Now it's clear that was not what happened.
This strike was taken in the earnest belief that it would prevent an imminent threat to our forces and the evacuees at the airport. But it was a mistake, and I offer my sincere apology. As the combatant commander, I am fully responsible for this strike and this tragic outcome.
The US says it's considering paying compensation to the surviving family members.
Let's now take a look at some other stories making headlines around the world. Taliban leaders have turned the Kabul building that housed Afghanistan's Ministry of Women's Affairs into the offices for the religious police. It's the latest sign that the Taliban are restricting women's rights as they settle into government, just a month after they seized control of Kabul. Anti-lockdown protesters have clashed with police in Australia's 2 biggest cities. In Melbourne, police used pepper spray and arrested over 200 people. Both Melbourne and Sydney are in a hard lockdown as Australia struggles to contain a 3rd wave of coronavirus infections. In Paris, the Notre Dame Cathedral is finally stable enough for artisans to start rebuilding it. It took over 2 years to secure the structure following a devastating fire in 2019. Authorities aim to reopen the cathedral by 2024 when Paris will host the Olympic Games. Now, it's day 2 of voting in Russia's parliamentary election, but the results are seen as a foregone conclusion. Opposition figures have been detained or barred from running, clearing the way for President Vladimir Putin's United Russia Party. Polling stations are open for 3 days, and there have already been allegations of voting irregularities. And for the first time, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe has not sent election observers. It says limits on the numbers of its staff would make its job impossible to do. The authorities have also made it hard for opposition candidates to run their campaigns. Now, DW reporter Pablo Foley-Elias is monitoring this story for us. Pablo, nice to see you. So let's talk about the allegations. What can you tell us about that?
Hi, Eddie. Well, independent election monitors, Golos, have registered close to 2,000 instances of fraud in just Friday's first day of voting. Now, practices like dropping large numbers of votes, we're going to see it in some images now in a couple of seconds, votes into the ballot box, like we can see it here now. You can actually, if you take a close look, you can see this person here is dropping pretty large number of votes into that ballot box there. Now, this was filmed, it's believed, in St. Petersburg and posted by Irina Fatyanova. She's Alexei Navalny, the opposition figure's former chief of staff in the city. She's been disqualified from running, but what she's been doing is she's been monitoring the vote there. Now, there's also been cases of voters being bussed from polling station to polling station and voting multiple times. And these allegations do have the potential to outrage Russians. But whether we're going to see large, we'll say, protests in Russia as a result of this, it's fair to say it's unlikely. We could see some protests, but let's wait and see what happens in the next few days. Yeah, only time will tell. Now, the candidates of opposition leader Alexei Navalny, they are barred from this race, but they're trying to influence it anyway through a how-to-vote app online. Has that been successful? Tell us about that. Well, Eddie, measuring success is always a difficult one, and particularly at the moment, it's perhaps a little bit too early to say whether it's been a success or not. But this smart voting app, what it does is it shows how likely an opposition candidate is to winning a race in particular, and who could potentially unseat the ruling United Russia Party candidate. That's what it does. Now, originally, the smart voting app was available on Apple and Google. It was then pulled from those online stores. They said that they were citing, they were basically essentially following Russian laws, which wouldn't permit that from being on their platforms. Navalny's organisation is designated as extremist, and they said that the app would constitute interference. Now, Navalny's organisers say that Apple and Google are essentially caving into the Kremlin's blackmail. Interesting one there. Let's take a look at one particularly infamous election race in St. Petersburg where 3 doppelgangers are running. I've never heard that before. Right, that's right. Now, in St. Petersburg, we're also going to see in a few seconds 3 candidates called Boris Vishnevsky are running. Now, Boris Vishnevsky is an opposition politician, and he's battling 2 other candidates who we're going to see now in these images. He's claimed in a tweet that these spoiler candidates apparently changed their appearance to confuse the voters at the polls. Now, he actually spoke to DW and he said this. He said, what kind of person renounces the name their parents gave them and changes it to their political opponent's name, all on their boss's orders? So certainly a case here that we're not used to seeing too often. Pablo, Leas, many thanks for the updates there. Thanks, Eddie. Now, law enforcement agencies in Washington are preparing for a rally outside the U.S. Capitol. The protesters are coming out to back hundreds of people arrested in January when supporters of Donald Trump stormed the Capitol building. More than 600 people have been charged with taking part in the violence on January 6th. An 8-foot-high fence that surrounded the building after the incident is now back, although police say it's difficult to verify whether threats of violence at today's event are credible. I am now joined by DW correspondent Stefan Simons, who is outside Capitol Hill, where the protest is due to take place. Stefan, how many people have gathered already, and what's the mood like?
Plenty of people here, but no protesters. I counted actually 3. I saw 3 protesters, believe it or not. But camera can show you that there is plenty of press here in full force, getting ready for what's supposed to be happening at 12. You see the stage there. Just up to a minute ago, there was Andrea Bocelli blasting out of those speakers, which is a little absurd for this event here. But as you can also see, and I would like to ask the camera to just show you this. So if you look what I'm looking at this, all those trucks there, those snow removal trucks actually, they're there in case, just in case, this is going to get in any way or form out of hand here. Now, what is going to get out of hand is supposedly up to 700 or 900 protesters are expected here by the organizer to protest for all the people who broke the law and stormed, attacked, and insurrected on this building behind me, the Capitol building on January 6th. Now, we'll see where this is all going to end, but for now, again, press, police, here in full force, protesters 3.
Okay, protesters 3, even though hundreds are expected. You keep us up to date on the show later. But you spoke about the organizers. The organizer of this protest is Look Ahead America. Tell us more about them.
Look at America is a child of Matt Brainard, who is a former Trump campaign aide, a Trump campaign operative. And he made, with this organization, Look Out America, he made it his cause to create awareness that authorities, FBI, and then, of course, judges and courts have now charged a lot of people, around 400 people, with various crimes which they have committed here on January 6th. So there were 500 arrests at the time, and no sentences except a few spilled out so far from this. But again, this is what this organization and the organizer, as well as this protest, is supposed to do, saying, hey, this was all fun and games, no harm done. Kind of reservationists in there,
okay.
But, you know, that's the case.
Okay. DW correspondent Stephen Simons outside Capitol Hill. Thank you, and stick around for us. Now, former Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika has died at the age of 84. Bouteflika stepped down from the presidency 2 years ago under pressure from mass protest and the military. He had rarely been seen in public since suffering a stroke in 2013.
When Bouteflika stepped down from his presidency in 2019, he had been largely absent from the public eye for 6 years. Bouteflika had suffered a stroke in 2013 and remained largely unfit thereafter. Bouteflika got into politics early, inspired by Algerian revolutionary and later President Houari Boumediene. He joined the Nationalist Party, National Liberation Front, and played a key role in liberating Algeria from French rule. He was just 19 years old. By 26, he was the world's youngest foreign minister, a record that still stands today. By 62, he was the president. People saw him as a strong yet flexible leader, but that changed over time. Bouteflika is best known for ending Algeria's decade-long civil war that killed some 200,000 people. In an unprecedented move, he granted amnesty to the rebel forces involved. After the Arab Spring, Bouteflika managed to cling to power, even as other North African leaders fell. In 2019, Bouteflika announced he would seek a 5th term as president. Algerians were outraged. Their country was plagued with corruption, there was lack of freedom, and poverty was rising. Millions of people joined nationwide protests demanding that Bouteflika step down. And he did, on April 2nd, 2019, after 20 years in power.
It took almost 3 months and a team of climbers. Now, Paris is paying tribute to the late Bulgarian artist Christo by realizing his dream of rapping the Arc de Triomphe. The artist and his wife Jean-Claude were famous for rapping landmarks. Christo had wanted to tackle the Napoleon-era monument since he arrived in Paris in the 1960s. French President Emmanuel Macron inaugurated the installation on Thursday. Parisians can visit it for the next 2 weeks. Some visitors have come to pay their respects. Others are trying to find meaning in this work from the self-described irrational artist.
It is very moving knowing that it is a posthumous work. It is beautiful to see that the dream of the artist could be realized even if he's not there anymore. It gives me chills. I like the extravagant side. I don't know if it's beautiful. I'm not sure it matters if it's beautiful. There's the performance aspect that outweighs whether it's beautiful or not. I wonder about it. I find that what's difficult with contemporary art is that we don't have access to the meaning. What does the artist want to say?
You're watching DW News from Berlin. Up next is World Stories with a report on the forgotten helpers of 9/11. We'll have more headlines for you at the top of the hour. I am Eddie Micah Jr. Thanks for watching.
Justice and humanity.
Economic growth.
Champions. Women have been great role models.
The city has been in lockdown.
Scores arrested as anti-lockdown protests on Melbourne streets turn violent. Strong criticism from the French ambassador as a diplomatic row over a submarine deal intensifies.
Clumsy, inadequate, un-Australian situation.
And the Panthers end Parramatta's NRL season with a bruising finals clash in Mackay. Hello and welcome.